Well, thank you again. I'm trying to put 3 short questions and maybe get short answers as well before we open the panel. Alex, I wonder whether you sort of notice imagination doesn't come ex nihilo, whether you can actually keep that statement. I mean, all the distinctions you introduced, obviously they are interrelated, that's true. But isn't at the core something which just happens? As I think I told you about it, Aristotle in the Generatione et Corruptione said, if you want to understand something new happening, you will realize it's something which you can't found anywhere else, so it comes out of nothing. What do you say?
Thank you, Helmut. I mean, I think that's something coming from nothing. I mean, oldest and perhaps deepest yet unanswerable philosophical question. But imagination, I mean, I think it depends. In Whitehead, I don't know, my instinct here is to say, well, if we want to dig down a little bit, find the roots here, conceptual reversion. If you're going to stick with the category of conceptual reversion, yes, ex nihilo. But as we heard, Whitehead abolishes it in a certain sort of way, and that abolishing is because you have a feeling of the primordial nature of God, which is the structuring of possibility. So if you want to abolish conceptual reversion, well, it's not from nothing. It's because you have some feeling of possibility writ large. So no. But if you don't want to talk about possibility writ large, then sure. Because in a way, the action of I guess I'm inclined to agree with you, because the action of imagination, it's like, yes, it's coming. You have felt, even if you want to say you felt the primordial nature of God. Well, I mean, what's yours? So you're, what? Red rather than, why is it, it just happens. Yeah.
I mean, that's the point. Process and Reality 317. Whitehead is criticizing Aristotle for his idea of substance, but he says he has the best analysis of generation and disappearing. And he's referring to this little book by Aristotle, which had been edited in 1924 by his Oxford colleague, H.H. Joachim. But I mean, that's a longer point of discussion. Okay, thank you. A small question simply. Would you be able, Jeremy, to define the special function of film vis-à-vis all other forms of art in a nutshell, if you like?
Good luck.
Perhaps. I think, to me, what sets film apart is that it is a collection or an amalgamation of images, and so it's the construction of the film itself is a process, and it can be uncertain or uncontrolled in a sense, whereas as other forms perhaps can be controlled by the artist in certain ways. I suppose in all forms of art there is definitely flux and input of creative material from outside. But I think, the process of making a film is inherently open to the conditions of what is before you that in a sense are beyond control.
I think you guessed probably that I wanted to provoke you, of course. I mean, that sometimes helps, not in a bad way, but sort of trying to get something out. Yeah, then, Kathleen, there was a big discussion in Germany on secularization. Hans Blumenberg had written a major book on the legitimacy of modernity, criticizing the old concept of secularization as a loss, loss of religious impact and so on. Is that a focus you see in what is so-called post-secularism, or would you define that differently? I heard certain similarities there, but...
I think Habermas in particular was very clear about there being a loss, right?
Yeah.
And so I specifically don't focus on him because I'm not focused on the loss. And I don't think that is as appropriate to be brought into conversation with process, because I don't think that is as fruitful or generative in conversation with Whitehead, which is part of the reason I lean more on Caputo and specifically on Connolly. One, because Connolly is so, whether he will define himself as such, he is very steeped in process thought. And he naturally fits that bill a lot more cleanly. I think the focus on loss and the focus on dichotomies and binaries is problematic to be in conversation and to be widely used with Whitehead.
That's why I was mentioning Hans Blumenberg. He would really, and it's a terrific work, because I think it has been translated for a long time, legitimacy of modernity would just fit in there as well, and he has lots of extra philosophical material in it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I touched on that briefly in the original thing that was adapted from, but I had to cut a lot.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a few minutes for questions. I see Sinan. Let's go to Farhad, and then I'll go to Sinan.
Actually, we do.
I just wanted to pick up on Helmut's question to Alex. I've reflected on similar things that you presented, Alex, in your presentation, the conscious imagination and all of that. And it seems to me that moment of suspended judgment between affirmation or negation of input is the nihilo, the empty space, the interstitial space from which the novelty comes. And it's built right into his system of what consciousness is and the freedom that it has. What do you think of that?
I hadn't, like I said, I just kind of started doing this exploration. Hadn't thought of that. Sounds great. I'm going to write, yeah. I don't really have too much to add. That sounds, something to, definitely for me to think more about. Thank you.
I have a small chapter on that.
Oh yeah, please.
Helmut wanted to provoke Jeremy with this question. I actually have a question to Jeremy about provocation. And it's about the aesthetic, or the quality of the aesthetic experience, and especially when you talk about art in the context of ecology, we have this big problem that we're often facing terrible images, really that provoke emotions, which are really a lot of grief, disgust, despair. And at the same time, arts are known to, wrap you in a cloud of feeling comfort. And somehow, especially you talked about Edward Burtynsky's work, it is almost too comforting to make you realize that this is something really problematic we're looking at. And so my question is really, how do you see the role of arts in terms of provoking an action, but also at the same time being its own cause? Because of course no artist wants to be an illustrator of the ecological movement. They want to be artists. Mm-hmm. That's my question.
Wow. I think films or works of art that leave the questions open, so not necessarily providing a clear call to action at the end, but creating those dislocations that make us feel uncomfortable is necessary. And you may be right that Berdnitsky's work is too aesthetically pleasing or wraps you in that sort of sense of beauty and wonder without provoking the disgust at how that sort of strangely beautiful object was actually created. I think of some films that we have included in the film festival both this year and in the past that sort of both talk about ecological destruction as well as solutions, but then even problematize the solutions by saying that this may not be scalable, it may not be enough in enough time, and they don't provide the solid answers. And I think the films that end with questions are the best at provoking conversation and then at perhaps provoking something that emerges further from that conversation. So, hope that gets at it in a sense.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Caitlin.